So maybe you're finally getting closer to somebody you're interested in romantically, and you find that out of the blue, they just seem to pull away. Well, did you know that there are 5 specific triggers that cause the dismissive avoidant attachment style to pull away faster than anything and even to leave relationships? And in today's video, I'm going to take you through exactly what those 5 major triggers are so that you can understand them, avoid them, and also make sure that you are speaking up for your own needs in a relationship while being able to be mindful of the things that could cause somebody else to feel hurt and triggered too. Now, if you're new to this channel, hello and welcome. We talk so much on this channel about relationships, dating, attachment styles, and really how to heal, especially by engaging the subconscious mind in the process, because your subconscious mind is responsible for 95% of your thoughts, beliefs, actions, emotions. And this is according to Harvard Business Review and so many studies. But if you don't know how to engage your subconscious mind in the healing journey, it can cause you to feel like you are in a push-pull pattern of wanting to take steps forward, of even understanding things. But unless you engage the subconscious mind, you'll feel like you understand, but don't really see your behaviors and emotions and actual state changing. So it's really important that you dive into that. And we're going to talk about how to actually rewire some of these triggers in a small exercise at the end here today that you can actually use if you are the dismissive avoidant. But I'm going to guess that most people watching this video are loved ones or partners of a dismissive avoidant attachment style. And so I'm going to share this exercise that you can plug into your own core wounds here today as well. So if you've ever been in a situation where you are dating a dismissive avoidant, you probably know that just as you start to get closer or build momentum, it's almost like they shut down and pull away. And their behaviors can feel really overwhelming to you. It can feel very confusing the vast majority of the time because you're thinking, did I do something wrong? Is it me? What's going on? But I think something first that we have to recognize about triggers is when somebody has a deep trigger, people, when they trigger them, are the catalyst for the trigger, not the cause. And what I mean by this is that if you have a dismissive avoidant partner who has this huge fear of being trapped, if that fear is based on some sort of painful event from childhood, and that's how triggers develop, we store something painful from childhood and then we're extra sensitive to it later on in life because when somebody brings it up or pushes that button or trigger, the conscious basically says to the subconscious mind, what do we know about feeling this way? And because the subconscious mind actually stores everything, it essentially floods out all of the previous times that we felt that kind of emotion and experience. And now we're feeling all of these combined past times along with the present objective experience in front of us that's triggering us. And now we're experiencing 5x or 10x the pain and suffering. And that's why a trigger is a trigger, because it's not just about what's happening in real time. It's what's happening in the past. In the case of a dismissive avoidant, because they often feel engulfed or trapped in their early childhood experiences, what ends up taking place is later on, if somebody does the tiniest thing to make them feel trapped, like makes a demand or has an expectation to somebody else who's secure and doesn't have that trigger, that might not be a big deal. That might be time to set a boundary or just have a conversation and negotiate about something in a healthy way. But to somebody who has a pre-existing trigger, that's going to cause them to go really strongly into how they usually cope when they feel that trigger. Okay, so as a dismissive avoidant, when they feel triggered, what do? They deactivate, they push away. That's their coping mechanism that has also been conditioned in there along with the trigger. Just like for an anxious attachment style, when their trigger of abandonment shows up, again, they're not just experiencing the trigger of abandonment in front of them, they're experiencing the abandonment experience in front of them combined with all the previous times and emotions that they felt abandoned in the past. And that's why triggers hurt so much and are so painful and uncomfortable. And then an anxious attachment style, they have this conditioned response to their trigger, right? We're used to trying to cope in certain ways, and an anxious attachment will really cling or trying to maintain proximity in the relationship, just like a dismissive avoidant will shut down. So we see these triggers and then we see these triggering behaviors that tend to accompany them, which is how we try to soothe. So the biggest ones for a dismissive avoidant, and that's why I say, by the way, that people in relationships with somebody who's triggered, right? They're the catalyst, they're not the cause. Okay. And what I mean by that is that you may be pushing somebody's button, but that button pre-exists, right? That button isn't about you. That button is, hey, this person has a sensitivity because they've had lots of stored experiences like this in the past that are literally existing at the subconscious level, because the subconscious is kind of like this giant warehouse that stores all of these things. And yes, it consolidates memories over time a little bit, And there's some interesting information and research about memory and how we store things. But at the end of the day, it's taking all of these events and experiences in and holding on to them. So now what you need to understand are, what are those big triggers? What are the things that this person's so sensitive to? And how can I actually communicate my need in a way that's going to still bypass this person's triggers? So number one, fear of being trapped. And these are not in any particular order. Number two, believe it or not, is actually the fear of being unsafe. Okay. Now, this isn't like a dismissive avoidant who is all stoic and sometimes tough or strong on the outside. It's not like they're like, oh, I'm going to get, jumped in a dark alley. It's not this like fear of like physical safety the vast majority of the time, but you know what dismissive avoidants feel so often? They so often feel emotionally unsafe. They do not want to feel their emotions. They do not like when people bring up their emotions or bring their emotions out of them, because they don't know how to handle their emotions. They weren't given proper modeling for emotions and them being handled in a healthy way. They weren't given proper attunement to their emotions. So they think their emotions are this unacceptable, unhealthy thing that they shouldn't feel. And so when somebody brings up emotions or tries to have an emotional conversation, it's bringing up something in them that they're scared to feel. And again, it's the button, right? It's this pre-existing button, this pre-existing trigger. It's not because you want to have the emotional conversation that, oh my gosh, you're such a triggering person. No, no, no. It's that you just happen to be pushing on a trigger that's pre-existing. Okay. So there's all this emotion around it or discomfort around it because there are lots of past experiences where this was made to feel uncomfortable. So I am trapped. I am unsafe. Anything that feels controlling, trapping, anything like that, expectations that are too strong, too fast, moving a relationship along too soon, like all of those things would fall under the trapped category. And unsafe would be any demands on like, well, what are you feeling? And trying to get them to feel too much or express too much too vulnerably. But also in a really big way, if there's conflict that's volatile, that's very triggering for a dismissive avoidant and will often cause them to shut down and even run and hit the eject button on a relationship. Third big one is criticism. If they feel criticized, they have this huge I am defective core wound. And defective is sort of this fear of like feeling fundamentally broken. It goes hand in hand with toxic shame. And we have other videos on this channel about that, but you'll generally see that somebody has this big I'm defective core wound, and they really take criticism to heart as a result. Okay. So anything where there's like criticism, this person's not hearing you say, oh, your behavior was wrong. They're hearing you say, you are fundamentally flawed and broken. So if you are, for example, saying to them, oh, you didn't call me back, like what's going on? They're hearing like, oh, you don't know how to do a relationship. You're fundamentally broken. They're not hearing, oh, the behavior of not calling back was something that I prefer to not happen in the relationship. How can we grow and improve that? And so we're going to come to the end about how to bypass these triggers so you can still get heard and communicate your needs. And we'll go through that little sort of exercise here together. Number 4, okay, I am weak. So dismissive avoidants have this deep feeling that like if I express too much or I open up too much, I am weak. And that is a weak thing to do. And it's not acceptable and it's not okay. And again, a lot of this triggering comes not because of how somebody on the outside is making them feel, but because of how they were made to feel about expressing emotions growing up. If when they expressed emotions growing up, they were shamed, dismissed, the emotions were deflected or ignored, they think, okay, this doesn't get me anywhere. Emotions are not good. I have to really, really stuff them down and try not to think about these things too much at all. Okay. Now, there are other big core wounds or triggers. By the way, if you want to go, and I still have one more that I'll share, but if you want to go deeper into core wounds and triggers and actually how to rewire these as your attachment style or somebody else's, or just learning about somebody else's, there's, of course, all about this fully for free down below. It helps you understand your core wounds and triggers, the triggers of other people's, and rewire them really efficiently. And these are the things that tend to ruin relationships. Like these core triggers cause so much devastation in relationships because they're the things that drive us up the wall, right? They're the things that really get to us and really break us down. And we don't have to live with these things our whole lives. So you're not born with them. They get conditioned into you. And we leverage principles of neuroplasticity and neurogenesis to actually rewire these things. I'll put a link fully for free for that down below. But there's number 5. And again, there's other core triggers for a dismissive avoidant, but these are really the top 5, like major ones that you will tend to see in a pretty big way. And it's this idea that I will be helpless or powerless if I rely on somebody else. So a lot of dismissive avoidants really don't like to rely on people. They feel like, from childhood, if they tried to rely on somebody, especially around their emotions and their emotional needs, they were left feeling helpless. Like nobody was there to do that with them or help them or support them in that. And so they feel deeply helpless and unsupported around those things. And so they get terrified of opening up and leaning on people and asking for help and receiving support because they don't trust that it will stick around. They feel like they're going to be left high and dry and helpless because that was their experience, at least emotionally as a child. So if you're the loved one of a dismissive avoidant, here are some great things that can help you communicate your needs while also being mindful of their triggers. So if you have an expectation or a request, one of the easiest things to do is to say, hey, I totally respect your freedom. And I also realize that I have this need. Can we find a middle ground? Okay. And when you say I have this need, you actually say what the need is. Okay. So what we're doing is we're communicating to the opposite of their trigger. This is actually a tool when it comes to communication that you can use with all attachment styles called prefacing. And what prefacing means is we're trying to bypass the core wound in our communication so that the person just doesn't even get triggered to begin with. And I know that some people will be like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have to walk on eggshells in a relationship. Listen, if you feel like you're making an effort to communicate in a mindful way for your partner, first of all, that's what secure people do. And second of all, this is something that literally people do to get out of ruts in relationships and marriages all the time. It's extremely beneficial. It works very well. And thirdly, what walking on eggshells is if you are communicating and learning to communicate in a relationship in healthy ways, working to see if that helps shift the behavior of the person so that they can meet your needs. And if the person doesn't meet your needs and you stay, now you're walking on eggshells. Okay. But pouring into a relationship, learning skills and strategies to improve the quality of a relationship, and then vetting to see, does this move the needle? Does the other person improve? That's healthy. If they do improve, amazing. Look what you just did. You actually improved your communication and improved the quality of the relationship as a result. If you didn't, if the person doesn't show up and make an effort, then they're not going to show up and make an effort for whatever you do. And now you have to recognize that it's probably not the right relationship. So going back to this, if we have I am trapped core wounds, saying, hey, I respect your freedom and autonomy, and here's something that I need. Can we come to a middle ground somewhere? Okay. Number two, if somebody has this core wound of feeling unsafe, making sure that when you do conflict, you positively frame when you communicate. Instead of saying, you never do this, you don't do that, say, hey, I need a little bit of this. I need a little bit of that. Hey, I would love if we can spend more time together. I feel disconnected. Let's do something fun on the weekend. Instead of saying, you never spend enough time with me, you don't care. That doesn't make conflict feel safe for somebody who already feels emotionally unsafe. If somebody has a big core wound around feeling like they are weak, encourage them. Hey, communication is vulnerable, and yes, that can be scary, but that's strong. That's courageous. That's important. Set that tone in the relationship so that person can see the relationship to that differently. And if you can even look at the core wound of defective, when you feel like you need to give feedback and you know somebody could take that critically or could be sensitive to it, start off by saying something you appreciate about the person and then say, and here's something I would love to do more or have more of in our relationship. And that way you are framing it so that somebody is hearing that you don't think they're defective. You're starting off with something positive and then moving into communication that can improve the quality of the connection or relationship overall. Now, these are things for all attachment styles. We talk about this for the fearful avoidant, for the anxious attachment style, how we can actually preface and move around their core wounds. And it can really be life-changing for the quality of the relationship and the quality of the communication and understanding between two people. If you do want to go deeper, then you can check out that free link down below. It is available to check out those courses fully for free, just for a limited time. Also, if you enjoyed this video today, please subscribe. I put daily content out here, or share this with somebody who might benefit, or please like it if you feel inclined. Thank you so much for watching.